Well, thanks so much for coming. My name is Lori Ogden. I'm a teaching assistant professor in the Department of Mathematics. This is Lisa DiBartolomeo and Ashley Martucci. Lisa is in World Languages and Ashley in Curriculum and Instruction. And I thought I would just kind of start us off today. Really the point, I think, is to keep things very conversational and really learn from each other. But I thought I'd try to get the conversation going by just telling you a little bit about my thoughts with respect to motivating students and creating an engaging classroom environment. And let Lisa and Ashley do the same. And then just jump in anytime you have a question or comment. And like I said, really, we hope to keep things as a conversation and to really learn from each other. So I think the most important thing in motivating students is just really the culture that you create in the classroom. I think almost first and foremost, and it sounds kind of trivial, is you have to give students a reason to come to class. And I think if there's a reason for them to be there and they're engaged and participating, then management issues are usually non-existent. You know, I find in this day and time, there's so many resources available to them outside of class that, you know, for what reason do they need to come and just sit and listen to me talk? That I really try to provide opportunities for them to do things in class while we're together, especially in mathematics. I think their own psyche comes into play so much. If I give them a certain assignment that intimidates them and they're afraid of, they're gonna find value in putting their time and effort into some of the subjects that they think they're good at. So I really try to spend time in the classroom building them up and teaching them how to learn and how to ask questions and what is a good question. And when I think you keep that norm is that asking questions and helping each other out and learning how to think, which is what happens in your classroom, that they're motivated to learn and they want to be there. I encourage interaction. I encourage group work. One thing I've really learned over the years is it's not enough to just say, you know, here's some equations to solve, work in groups. And then they kind of look at each other like, okay, but that's really a task for an individual. It's not really a task that's worthy of a team. You know, so I think having thoughtful assignments in class, things that will encourage conversation and teamwork are important. And doing that kind of planning up front can really set the tone for an engaging classroom. Ashley?
I think on that note about group work, I have the pleasure of having smaller classes, so under 35 students normally. And then I also have the double pleasure of seeing my students throughout their program or throughout their time here at WVU at multiple experiences, so for different classes, which I love. So I get to build this lasting relationship with my students that has really been key in addressing really controversial issues in education, especially in light of things that have been happening with teacher work stoppages or shootings or those type of things that maybe we tend to shy away from. Because I've developed this relationship with my students and created a safe space for them to talk about these kinds of things, then they can come in and say, you know, we haven't been trained on what to do. But in terms of the group work, when Lori was talking about that, I also found that I have to talk to them about what does group work look like. We assume that our students know how to engage in group work, but we don't. We don't know maybe what our role is or what we're really good at, or especially if you're in a class where you don't know your peers very well, you don't know how to play off of each other. So engaging them in conversations about what does a group look like for this assignment? And so maybe you start out very simple with whatever they're doing, whatever activity they're doing, and who's going to play this role and who's going to play this role. And it tends to reduce fear. You know who's going to present, who's going to kind of take the role as the leader, who's going to do each of these pieces when it all comes together and you need to share to the larger group. So I think that's been really successful for us, which then of course translates for them into their classroom as pre-service teachers, because then they can use those same tools that we talk about oh, right, this works in my 7th grade classroom. I just assume my students know how to do group work. I've never really thought about that. We've never talked about what does that look like.
So I'm not I'm not hobbled like I would think that Lori is, because I don't teach math. I don't do math. Oh, no, it's true. I maybe have the luxury of teaching, if you look at the list of the big gen ed courses that I teach, it maybe just looks like I teach fun classes. But I like to approach them as the superstructure is fun and the base is very serious. And the base for me unites all of the topics that I do. So I teach a big class on vampires. Amanda went with me to Romania a couple of years ago. Underneath, though, superficially, we're talking about vampires in popular culture, in literature, and film. But underneath, what we're really talking about is critical engagement with popular culture. And that's something that's applicable every single day. And so one of the things that I try to do is, the accoutrements on the surface change with each course, whether it's Russian fairy tales or science fiction or vampires or Russian literature. But then underneath, what you're teaching them to do is to engage critically with material they encounter all the time, and with material that they need to be mindful consumers of in a way that I think is becoming clearly more and more important every day. And part of the way I do that, especially in bigger classes, but even in smaller classes, and those of you who were here last fall have seen these before, these are dollars that I Xerox, and I haven't been caught by the Secret Service yet. But I Xerox them and I put a character or person from the topic that I'm doing. This is Spike from Buffy. So that in a big class or even in a smaller class, when a student raises their hand and I call on them and they speak, they get one of these. So I or one of my TA, we go around and we hand them out. The students will write their names, usually the dates on the back, and then we collect them. And one of the reasons we do that is, especially with a big class, and in my classes participation counts, they need some sort of tangible feedback. Like, I got seen, I got heard, and I know I have something of a grade today, right? So they have a tangible example of, okay, if I get 2 of these every day or, a few times a week for the rest of the semester, I'm good to go for that part of my grade, right? And so one of the ways to motivate them, and they love these dollars. They love them. Donna?
Maybe it was too loud, but
Sorry.
I think I missed how you translate that. You give them the token, whatever it could be. and
Right.
then what do you-
I collect them at the end of class, and we tabulate them, and I enter them into my
So they write
spreadsheet.
their name on it, or?
They write their names on them, I collect them, and then I keep track of them. So over the course of the semester, if a student has only gotten one of these, then they begin to realize, okay, I need to step up my game in participating, right? And I also let them send me emails and things like that. But giving them some sort of clear feedback, immediate feedback that you're listening, that you've paid attention, that you've heard them and seen them is really helpful, because they love these. They kind of start little competitions among themselves. How many can I get? And then you have to cut some people off because, you're making it rain on them. But that's just one example, so.
Yeah, and I think students too, just holding them accountable, participation is part of your grade. And it's great when they have something to show for that, that they respond. I call them point gatherers. They want to gather their points. I feel sometimes like I'm just trying to trick them into doing what they need to do to learn. But do you guys have any questions or comments?
I have $1 million question for you. I teach business writing, fantastic kids, intensive writing, so our class sizes are 25 as they should be. And it's 4 tables with 6 seats around each table. So they work in groups all the time. But here's the issue, and I don't know if it's a difference between, I've taught at private schools where I had no problem with it versus public. Please write this down, please take notes. They'll sit there and smile at me, and I'll be damned if I see any pens or pencils or paper, a few, and I'm not trying to sound sexist, some of the women will, most of the men won't, period. So what do? And I've been grappling with that for several years here. I've never had that problem at a private university. As soon as you said write something down, boom, they're all over it. And I'm just wondering if other people are experiencing this, if it's just me and the business college. And then my $1 million thing is, what do you do about it? And I'll repeat it over and over. Please write this down. It's going to be on your assignment. Do it. And they don't. They'll smile at me, but they don't do it. So how do you motivate
At
a
least they're
class like that?
smiling. You know, some days there's like that blank
The
look.
assignments get really messed up, and I feel like I'm being overly redundant. I'll mention the same thing 2 or 3 times in advance. Here's how you do it. Here's how you do it. Write it down. So,
Do you ever ask to see their notes? Like when you give them an assignment, like kind of going back to what do they need their
I
notes for?
compliment them if I see some of them writing notes. I'll move throughout the classroom and let them know. So I try to do as much on that, but.
Or if they aren't sure how to do something, sometimes I'll be like, well, we took notes on this yesterday. Let me see what you wrote down.
Yeah. Well, I know my answer to that question for a lot of them, but I don't know, it's something I'm grappling with. I wonder if other folks in this audience are having to deal with that, but.
You could send a handout, but then they could lose that.
Right.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's really tough, I think.
So I think putting it up on eCampus has worked for me, and then they can pull it and actually type within it.
You mean when
has
eCampus is
been-
working?
Well, I mean, there's that. But it allows them maybe to see a structure of even how you visualize the assignment, or you are thinking about what that looks like. Because I think that for my students, sometimes when I say write this down, they don't even know how to start to write something down. You know, like they don't know what part of that concept that they need to be writing down. And so when I provide them with a note structure almost, then they can say, okay, well, this is the main idea, and then maybe I can expand upon that. And when I look back on it, it will remind me of what you've said or what this assignment looks like.
They also tend to be fairly goal-oriented, so before you say something, if you say, you're going to need to know this for the exam, or this will be integral to you composing your essay, then they, oh, now I need to pay attention, right? But I mean, if they come to class and they don't have pens or pencils, I had a student last semester who came to take a test, didn't have a writing implement, and she was very nasty about it. She said, in high school, our teachers gave us pens and pencils. And I thought, okay, all right, here we go. This is college. Yeah, so, I mean, that's a pretty basic thing, yeah.
And I think going off of that, kind of seeing how many students are actually using laptops for notes instead of pen and paper, because if you don't have pen and paper, you can't really bring it out.
Or even their phones.
Yeah, or even their phones. So kind of stressing at the beginning of class, you're going to need pen and paper today, so you'll be able to write things down. Because if it's easily accessible, they'll be more likely to write it down. But if they're using laptops, then it'd be hard to see whether they're actually typing
I have a
something
few
in or
that
not.
do, maybe 2 or 3 at the most, but the majority don't. It's traditional note-taking.
But I know for me, kind of taking both of those things into account, I spent a semester where I did a classroom flip, and the students watched the lecture at home, and it worked best when I provided a note guide. So they would watch the videos, and they would have, they would be able to follow along in the note guide and take notes in certain places and do certain problems, but then I would ask them to produce it. So when we were going over things the next day in class with, on the section they should have taken notes on the night before, and they would say, well, I don't know how to do this. I'd be like, oh, we'll pull out your notes from last night. And, and I didn't make a huge deal about it the first time they didn't, but they got the picture. I mean, I do really think that worked by just putting them on the spot, like you should have something to produce right now, and holding them accountable for that. And if they didn't, then they learned that they needed to.
I do a mind map, and I start with, so it's got a drawing on it where the notes are going to go on the paper. Give that to them, tell them to get out their pen or pencil, and then we're all starting at the same spot, so I say, now everybody, this is our assignment, so write that here. And then next, write this, and then under that, write what you're bringing to it, what your thoughts are, and where your questions are. And kind of build on that. So I'm like actually really specifically saying, here, write this here, now here. And so it's methodical, but
But they don't necessarily know how to take notes. They don't know how to learn. And then I think that is part of it, is teaching them how to learn. And hopefully you see some growth over the semester. I know, again, I go back to this classroom flipping because it worked well for that kind of thing. It gave you the freedom to really engage students and get to know them on a personal level. And in interviewing some of my students after, one of the greatest things I thought that came out is the student said, I learned how to ask better questions. And I said, well, what's a better question? And she said, I finally knew what to ask. And I think that's the whole point, is you're trying to get them to figure out how to identify what they know and what they don't know, so they know how to fill in those holes and the right questions to ask.
Well, and I would maybe ask, how many of you teach gen ed classes? The things that are just required and not necessarily specialized? When you're in a special, like when I teach upper division Russian, those kids want to be there. They're already motivated. That's easy. But when you teach the gen ed classes where people are just there to check off a box, English 101 or whatever, you have a different, so I would say that the most important thing you can do there, and this is one of the things that we tried to do with revising from GEC to GEF by bringing in the LEAP goals and that sort of thing. One of the things that helps students understand why they're learning what they're learning is to show how it's applicable to everyday life, to their future careers, to whatever it is, right? Not, we're just going to learn about these math problems, and those math problems never ever live in the world, right? Or you're teaching chemistry and you're only talking about chemistry, instead of maybe saying, hey, let's talk about the chemistry of caramelizing onions, right? Or when you burn your ramen noodles on the stove, what happens to your ramen noodles, right? Chemically. So if you can show them how what you're doing in your class, whether it's language, whether it's writing skills, all of those things, if you can show them the immediate applicability, not just tomorrow, but 10 years from now, for whatever their career ends up being, then they're a little bit more motivated. Then they begin to see the real world meaning and importance of some of what you're doing, not just the disciplinary basics and those substantive points, right? There are a couple of layers there. You had a question.
Well, I was just gonna say, or ask, I wonder if at the beginning of the semester, the very first day, you say, the expectation in this class is that you will be taking notes. So you're all gonna need a notebook. I mean, just sort of tell them that up front and say, it's something that I'll be paying attention to throughout the semester. It's part of your grade. It just might let them know that it is important. And, I mean, you could say more about why it's important to have these notes, but I think sometimes just giving them that framework, that structure that you talked about.
I take notes.
My plan is to give them a notebook and actually grade that, one of their notebooks on quantity only. I don't care what they write in it. And then they're going to have another online place where it's convergent and they have to decide which of those things they're going to actually apply.
What other issues do you all have in the classroom with student participation?
Well, I have a question about groups, because, so my plan is I'll have 25 students, I'll have 5 groups of 5. And I want them to take turns facilitating. And my thought is, they definitely won't be able to do that right off the bat, that maybe I'll have experts, or that is trained, I'll have colleagues come in, and a couple times we'll do the circles, the groups, the group work, and get a routine going with someone leading as facilitator, and then have some kind of structured, that you guys understand what that role is, or an exercise to show that they do and answer their questions, and then let them take turns. Do you have any other, because at that point, I can't have 4 or 5 colleagues come in 3 days a week for those, or even, a third of the semester. So, any thoughts about that?
So I run groups in my online class too. And the first time I taught it, I did not model it. I just put them out as group instructor or as leader for the module. I mean, it's like, and you watch it happen, and you're like, oh, I can't take it back fast enough. You know, it's online. Like, at least face to face, you can kind of like rally them back and go, okay, we're going to start this over again. Online, you like just watch it crash and burn. So quickly, I learned that I need to model it, and I think it's exactly what you're saying. So hey, I'm going to be your group leader, and this is how this looks. So I'm going to post this information. You're going to respond to me. These are the kind of posts as a group leader I expect that you're going to be engaging in. Not great idea, that doesn't count. But I want it to be thoughtful. I want it to be meaningful. Can you pull in prior experiences? Can you pull in theory? Can you pull in whatever it may be to make this connection for your peers? Because the idea is in smaller groups, right, we can talk about things, we can dive a little bit deeper into it. So I think that using that modeling technique, hopefully it'll work for you and you don't have to dive bomb on your first one. But I quickly in that online class, the next week, we were back up in modeling, and you learn from those mistakes too.
Your class is face-to-face?
It will be, yes.
Yeah,
And a little bit, a little blended.
yeah. I wonder if you could record, if they had recorders and they could record their group work?
Oh, yeah, they're gonna have cameras. It's
Yeah.
a digital storytelling.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
How cool. Because that'll be interesting to see, and then you can even provide feedback, you know, from really being able to see how the group is interacting.
I think also that self-reflection of like stepping back and looking at the group. Like, oh, okay, this is what we dialogued about. Now we're going to step back and we're going to watch it again from a different lens. So now I'm not participating, I'm the viewer. How do you think this went? And so maybe you use your panel that you bring in to model it first, right? It gets critical and it gets scary sometimes too, because we don't want to open ourselves up. So maybe if they're looking at maybe your colleagues, they can be a little more critical. But looking at it from that perspective too, what kind of things did they do well? What kind of things do we need to work on? And so what was the flow? Those type of things.
You can also,
Might be helpful.
especially if it's an early one in the semester when they don't know one another very well yet, or if it's a really big class. So in my Russian fairy tales class, you know, there are usually 120, 150 people in there, and I do some group projects, and so before the first exam, our review is a skit. And so I divide them up and I give each group a scenario and they have to perform the scenario. It's very low stakes, everybody gets participation points. It's basically to make it fun, and if there is a good group that does a great performance that really captures the scenario, it ends up helping the students study because they remember, oh, that crazy group that talked about the house spirit, and that helps them on the exam. But if you make it very low stakes and just very fun, then you're more likely to not only to get them to participate better, but you're also more likely to build the camaraderie and the rapport just going forward, right? So if you do that fairly early on, but it's not like a high stakes graded assignment, it's something where it's fun, it's get to know one another, you know, that kind of thing, then probably more likely they're gonna be more invested the next time around, and they're gonna have a better idea of how to work within their groups.
This is my first teaching experience in the United States, but I used to teach at the university level in my home country, and I'm teaching a third level class, so I mostly have juniors and seniors, and I'm trying to, because they are already attending job interviews and they are facing their graduation, so I'm trying like to do stuff which is applicable both like for the class and for the real life. And before, at the beginning, I created a short survey, so I know potentially their targets, their 5-year goals, their expectations of the class, their personal characteristics, and whether the course is required or they are just interested in that. So like most of them are there because the course is required for their major. 60 and something % reported that they are too shy to talk publicly. And I'm trying to take this into account. I'm trying to engage them, but it's really about like, I don't see this balance. For example, I ask them questions, very simple. Consumer behavior is fun it's very applicable, and it's we can use tons of examples from real life, their shopping behaviors, but they do not reply. Even if I ask them not about like the course concepts, are probably about their personal experiences, their observations, their shopping patterns, they keep silence. And before I started teaching this course last semester, I attended different various courses of my professors, my colleagues, to see what are they doing in class, how they engage students, how they interact with students. The problem is that they really don't want to be engaged. Like when I was sitting in the back rows, I was looking what they were doing. Instead of like typing their notes, they were just shopping, playing games, online, whatever. So it's really a problem, and this is a problem in my class too. And I really don't know what to do because I feel like I don't want to do some sort of like childish activities. They are adults. They are 20 and something year old people. They are going to job interviews. I'm trying to introduce them to real life, and it doesn't work. And I really don't know what to do. I feel like I talk maybe 90% of the class time. I try to engage them in small activities, but they just don't reply. They just don't want to be engaged. And this is like the middle of the second month. I told them about participation. I told them about the grading. And now I feel like most of them are trying, first of all, they are interested in a passing grade. They're not interested in a success in my course. And the second problem is that they are shopping for the grades now. So, for example, they come up and ask what they need to do to get the participation points. And when I tell them just participate, they ask questions, and I say that I'm not giving you grades for nodding your head or asking me a question about syllabus or whatever. I'm giving a grade for your opinion, for a valuable input into the class discussion, and they don't understand that. I really don't know what to do.
Wow, that's tough because, I mean, it would seem that your course has built-in motivation because not only is it required for the major, but it also has very applicable skills to the real-world tasks they're going to have to do. But, I mean, and I saw several of you nodding your heads and saying, yeah, they just, I mean, I think also at a certain point, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this, good, John went out of the room. John, go back out of the room. But I think at a certain point, we're going to lose some people, right? We can't be 100% effective with 100% of our students. There are going to be people who just don't want to be here, who don't care, who, you know, have whatever issue with you, with your class, with their major. I would say don't beat yourself up over maybe the one or two people who are just absolutely recalcitrant and just don't care, right? You can't probably reach those people. And I'm not saying completely give up on them, but I'm saying don't beat your head against the wall. Do what you can for the people who are interested and who are engaging. Make some effort to reach out to those people, but also don't kill yourself and beat yourself up and tell yourself that you're a terrible teacher because this person sitting in the back of the room would rather be on Facebook than listening to you, right? That's not on you.
There's another problem here. We all depend on their evaluations.
Yeah.
When they get bad grades, they blame you. And
Yeah.
I really don't want to be blamed for the things that I could not influence.
Right.
I don't know really how to influence people who don't want to stop.
Yeah.
Because I think that they should be motivated by I don't know what, but their future occupation or their student loan. I don't know.
Yeah.
At least.
Are you having fun and are you engaged and do you connect with them one-on-one? I mean, in the classroom, it's a big classroom of people, but you've got to make the connection with individuals there, get them to open up and you be present, you be engaged, and you not be like conscious of what they're not doing, but you've got to be. I just like, if I'm not having fun, they're not going to have
Right,
fun.
right.
So I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to be engaging. And yeah, if some of them don't come with me, that's plenty of them will.
Right.
I'm trying to, and the other thing is that one by one they're all really very nice. They shoot me very nice emails, and I feel like overall they have the nice attitude, but when they're all together in the group, I have 41 students in my class, which I think is too much for the beginner, but maybe 30 and something show up regularly, and it seems to be like, for me, it's relevantly a big classroom, but when they are in group, I think there is group interest as well. They're not as nice.
Now, I always
I'm
give
used to
mine.
smaller groups.
I have 80 in my pre-calculus class, and they're mostly freshmen. And attendance is required, so they usually do come. But I have this natural consequences spiel that I give them when I get to that point where I'm like sitting there and I know that they're not participating, that they're on their phones and they're doing whatever. And I don't give off this, very intimidating persona, and so I don't think they're intimidated by me. But I said, please don't let that make you think that I will not award the grade that you earn at the end of the semester with a smile on my face. I like my job. I'm not going to lose sleep at night. There are natural consequences to the choices that you make. This is how the class is set up. It's set up so that if you participate and you do what you're supposed to do, you will be successful and you will most likely earn a good grade. But these are your choices that you're making, kind of to your point. I can't make you do it, and I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm enjoying myself. I like what I'm doing. And we're all adults here, and you can make decisions for yourself, but these are the consequences to the decision. If you sit there and you play on Facebook or shop throughout class, you're probably not going to know what to do on the next assignment or on the next exam, or, and the consequence is you'll probably be sitting here again next semester.
And that's the attitude that you're likely to take when you go on a job interview or when you're working, and you're not going to be successful then. I mean, I think that there's an important need to balance, addressing individual student needs. So for instance, if you have a student with severe anxiety problems, work with that student one-on-one. If they have a problem contributing out loud in class, you work out an alternate way for them to contribute, whether it's coming and talking to you in office hours, emailing you, whatever, right? That's one way to address maybe some of those people, because maybe some of those people have backed off because they don't feel comfortable doing that, right? So maybe individually you can talk with them and say, would you like to come and talk to me during office hours as an alternative to participating in class? So we can go high touch in that direction for individual students who want that and who are motivated to accept that and work with you. But, the other way, I think Lori's point is incredibly important. These are adults, and the less we treat them like adults, the less they are likely to act like adults. And the more we coddle them, the more they will expect to continue to be coddled. And we're not doing them any favors by letting them think that that's acceptable behavior, right? So I'm not saying be Cruella de Vil and, kill all the puppies, but neither should you just let them walk all over you, right? I like the idea of consequences, and if they understand them, then that means they're accepting them. Right? A lot of us have in our syllabuses, this is a contract between you and me. And by staying in this class, you accept the terms of the contract.
It's the ownership.
Yeah.
too.
I borrowed this from one of my professors, but they actually signed a student contract with me.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the last page of the syllabus, and this states that they read the syllabus, they agree with my policies, and they sign. I don't know, maybe this might be helpful for other people too, because when they do something wrong, I tell them that you
Right.
signed up the contract with me, and this is the required part of the course, and you agreed with that. You didn't drop my course. So
Doesn't mean you have
do-
to like the contract.
Right.
That's what I say. You don't
Right.
have to like what this says. It's, this assignment's worth this amount, or
Right.
these are my rules.
I don't like the IRS,
Yeah.
but I'm going to pay my taxes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Are there any activities that you could flip where they are in charge? So flipping that ownership that this is my course to this is our course and you're going to help teach us. Not knowing the structure of your class and the exact topic, are there ways that you can have them kind of own the topic and then share out? So instead of you talking for 90 minutes, it becomes them sharing and maybe you talking for that 10 minutes, or interjecting, and it becomes more.
That's what I'm thinking about, because the first several lectures were just introductory, so I don't want them to have this burden of introducing themselves
Right.
to the beginning, to the basic concepts of the course. We had a class on subcultures, and I asked them if they represent any subculture, and they were willing to share this information. I gave them bonus points for that. I was very generous, 20 extra credit points. Only 2 people agreed, although I knew for sure that I had some people who represented very interesting subcultures and could talk about this in class. Only 2 people agreed doing this.
So what if you provided them with draw out of a hat, different kind of subcultures? So it's not me sharing about my subculture, but maybe it's me learning about
Right.
a subculture and then outwardly share.
Because they may have felt targeted by that in a way. I'm not saying that was your intention at all, but if they weren't comfortable enough to share about their subculture, it may have been because they didn't want to be the token representative for that subculture, or that they didn't want to be called upon to speak for everyone from that subculture. So mixing it up and assigning subcultures, may be a way to decrease that pressure on the individual person to, am I being called upon to represent all women because I shouldn't do that? So if you shift the burden so that it's not necessarily they're representing their own individual background, but that they have to do a little bit of research into something new, and then you're also decreasing their personal stakes in that activity. That might help a little bit too.
Yeah, but it's kind of a different approach. I really wanted them to share something which they
Sure.
cannot find in literature. I gave them a
Sure.
lot of information about different subcultures. We watched videos, but I really wanted people who were the part of the subcultures
Right.
say something about their inner
But
state.
sometimes you have to build the trust and the rapport in the class for them to feel comfortable enough doing that. So, if they're looking around and they're seeing their classmates are shopping online, they're probably not going to feel very invested in sharing.
And again, as I mentioned, 16, I just don't remember now, 62 or 64% reported that they are too shy
Mhm.
to speak publicly. And
Right.
I'm trying to somehow train them, because I told them that I have my own business practical experience and might be useful. I was trying to give them a lot of examples from my personal life, from my business life, to share, like, I'm not just an instructor, I'm a friend for you. I share my personal information. I want you to be engaged. I don't know, it still doesn't work.
We'll
I wonder if they were listening, though, to someone else report on their own subculture, if that would motivate them to engage, like if they're saying something that might not be accurate, or they interpreted something that they
Right.
read that really isn't true to that culture, that they might be, motivated to then talk about it. Well, that's not necessarily true, and maybe open up a little bit, that could even perhaps, spark some dialogue.
You had a hand a while back, didn't you?
I was just thinking of it.
No?
I thought you did, yeah?
I was mainly thinking about ice breaking early in the semester, of getting them possibly to respond to a consumer question, or how did they shop, or things like that. Write it down on a card without any names, pass them around the room. So they end up with a card that's not their own, but then they're reporting this, and they're sharing it, and they're talking, and they're seeing that their friends aren't rolling their eyes, or, that it goes well, and it's not their personal
Right.
kind of, it's somebody else in the room. They don't know who it is. That's all it is.
Because sometimes you get people who will overshare,
Yeah.
And you're like, no, I really don't need to know that about your grandparents or what you do at night in your bedroom. I don't want to know those things, and no one else does. But then, making it a little bit easier so it's less my innermost secrets. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I don't think I need the microphone. I can be loud. Thank you. I have a student who clearly does not understand boundaries in any way. And I think it might be because I'm younger. I'm 22.
And you're a female.
Yeah. But she frequently, like, in class on Thursday, she asked me if I could braid her hair. Like, that's entirely not appropriate. She's always really intrigued with my nails. Like, she wants to touch my hands. And I don't know, other than saying, like, this isn't okay, how to make that behavior stop.
Is she from another culture?
No.
Okay. Because
No.
sometimes that will make a really big difference. People from other cultures will have very different physical boundary ideas. Wow, I think I would just have her come to your office and sit her down and say, I want to understand where you're coming from, but I also want you to understand where I'm coming. This kind of makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
And I appreciate if you want to develop a relationship with me, and if I can help mentor you, but we also have to keep in mind what our limitations are, right? That I'm not your best friend, and I'm not going to have a pajama party with you, and we're not going to do each other's nails.
Yeah. She is an oversharer as well.
Yeah.
It's something I try to rein in every
I mean, it's a really
class.
uncomfortable conversation, but I think it's one that you have to have just for your own personal protection, for lots of reasons. Legally, not having her act out in some way, I think there are lots of reasons to have that conversation soon. Yeah.
I think you live and you learn too. I remember when I was very young teaching, and is some, but that certain, you would realize things almost before it was, not that it's too late to do something. I would recommend doing what you suggested, but that there's certain things you almost have to let go. Like, not necessarily this, but you're like, okay, I learned that I should have mentioned that when I started the class in the beginning. And I would kind of make note of those things. So, okay, fresh semester, when it started in the fall, I'm going to go through these things. Like, I was teaching, I remember, and I was in my early 20s in this huge lecture hall, and students would come up and come out to the front and exit the building. Big door slam, right in the middle of the class. And you'd say something, but again, to your point, you get to this point where if you're just constantly yelling and screaming, then that doesn't work, and the culture just gets weird. That there was a certain level of acceptance I would have to have. Okay, well, now I know at the beginning of next semester, I'm going to start with, okay, these things are inappropriate. It's not okay for you to walk down and exit this door as it echoes throughout the whole building. If you have to leave, please quietly exit the back. Just some of those little things that I would make note of early on, and then I know some of them have to let go, but to make a point to make some of these things very explicit, the next semester.
I think it's also kind of unfair because there are more and more expectations of faculty and more burdens heaped on faculty. We're supposed to be the first line of defense in recognizing students in trouble, right? We're supposed to be the ones they come to if they've been assaulted. That's what we're supposed to do, but we get very little training on that. And then we're also the ones who get, not to put too fine a point on it, who get in trouble if we aren't the most effective at that, right? So, I think that especially if you're a grad student, I assume, you want to protect yourself and you want to establish those boundaries, but, you can reiterate, I'm here for you, I want to be an advocate for you, I want to be a support for you, but these are the parameters of our involvement, right? And I can help connect you with other resources. And that's maybe one way to kind of shunt off that involvement, is to kind of say, well, I'm getting from you that you maybe need somebody to talk to more often. Have you thought about making an appointment with a therapist at the Caruth Center, or something along those lines, where it's clear that you're helping them, you're supporting them, but you're also sort of saying, I'm not the only resource you have, right? And I can't give you everything that you need. And I worry about that, especially, we were just talking about, Florida, and blaming teachers and blaming parents and blaming community members for not recognizing the signs. Yeah, we all have to be vigilant and we all have to be paying attention, but it's also not our fault. And I worry that something is gonna happen to this person and then you're gonna beat yourself up over it. And I think you need to distance yourself a little bit there.
Yeah, but also you could say something like, it would be very unprofessional of me to engage in this sort of behavior. And that would really put it on a different level, I think. And, she would respect you for that, you'd have to.
Yeah. Especially if you're a graduate student, you can always kick it upstairs and say, look, there are very clear parameters and boundaries of what I'm allowed to do, and I'm not allowed to do that, right? You can, if you want to talk about that, I can send you to this person. That's really not your pay grade to have to worry about, because you don't really have a pay grade.
But I'm sure in the fall, when you go through, don't come down the classroom and walk out the front door while I'm teaching, you can also say, and don't come up and rub my hair or braid my hair, and it'll lighten the mood of your goals and expectations, because they'll think you're joking. In reality, you're going, oh yeah, because I've done this before.
You do learn.
Sense of humor.
You do learn, and Amanda has seen this in a syllabus. So in my science fiction class, I let people do extra credit assignments, and I have had to, in the past 4 or 5 years, add a codicil: no live or dead creatures may be submitted for science fiction extra credit, because one year I got a young woman who gave me a hermit crab, which she had bedazzled and then put in a tank that she thought looked like a planet. And then one year I got a dead bat. So you learn. And then you add more stuff to your syllabus and it gets longer and longer and longer. Yeah.
I give them 100 participation professionalism points in the beginning, and I explain them the rules: how to write email, how to talk to your professor, how to behave professionally, how to present it, etc., etc. And then I told them that I will deduct these points throughout the semester for inappropriate unprofessional behaviors, for emails which says just, hey, I'm not going to come in your class, or which doesn't contain the topic, or something which is not appropriate in a business environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if anyone would like to borrow this idea.
Yeah, I think it all comes kind of back to this theme that we've been talking about, is that they really don't know some of these things. They don't really know how to take notes. They don't really know how to learn. They don't know how to be professional. Even though that's not necessarily the content that we're teaching sometimes, those are still the skills that have to be kind of the foundation of our courses.
Again, I told them, because I collected this data from the survey, I told them that if you're interested in particular topics, I can spend 10, 15 minutes in your class explaining that. Even if it's not related to consumer behavior, but you would like to know how to make an impression on the interview, how to establish business communications, anything else that you might be interested in. I have business experience, so I'm here for you.
What other questions do you guys have? I think we have, 10 more minutes?
Yeah,
Something like
I think
that?
so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do we motivate the people in this room?
One of the comments that I would just add, it took me a while to adjust to understanding what this, accepting maybe their level of motivation, because I teach small, upper level classes, which are generally electives, right? Because everyone's like, oh, this is a required class, and they're not motivated. So I assumed this is an elective. They selected this. They want to be here. They should be motivated. But I just think, well, maybe it's sort of like an election. My class was perhaps the least objectionable of the things they were thinking about. And a lot of time, I've now learned that sometimes they're not trying for an A.
Yeah.
That shocked me, because we had this mantra that you have high standards and they will live up to it, and some do, of course, and you get the ones who are raising their hand to answer every single question, in the front row. But some of them are in that class and they're perfectly happy to be getting a B or even a C in that class. And it shocked me for a while, because I was like, well, why aren't you trying harder? But they have other priorities and other things taking their time. And so it's kind of like you said, I was saying, well, what am I doing wrong? Or how I still would like to motivate them more. But they have a lot of responsibilities. They're juggling other classes. And
Most of them work jobs too.
yeah, and so, if they're content with the C, I always felt the ones that obviously failed, the Ds and the Fs, those never bothered me. I'm like, but it's the ones
Donna,
that
you're
just.
so heartless.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, maybe the Ds. But the ones that are just there with the C and just kind of coasting through, and they could do better. But again, I don't want to coddle them. Like, the more you make it easier for them, the more they just want you to make it easy.
Well, I think that the other thing that I would say is to talk to your colleagues and to talk to the people in your grad school cohort, because if you're having that problem, then maybe they are, and maybe you can come together and solve some of those problems, and then you also don't feel quite so alone and maybe under threat by some of the things that you're having to deal with. I think it's really important that we feel comfortable talking to one another, supporting one another, guiding one another. I think, panels like this are really nice because we get to hear from a bunch of different perspectives, people in a bunch of different disciplines. And it's good to know that you're not the only one wrestling with these pressures and dealing with people who don't care or want to braid your hair or bring you dead animals or whatever it may be. I think it's really important to make that time, and especially if you're from an underrepresented group, to find people who are also from that underrepresented group to kind of get together with and share some of your experiences. I think that can be very, very helpful.
And that there is no easy answer.
Yeah.
You know, that, I think there's just a lot of trial and error. And just because sometimes even the way we're set up, there has to be sometimes a time period before you could try again, you know, that just kind of keeping things in perspective.
Yeah.
And anytime a student's underperforming, I reach out to them and try to, like, again, just like make a personal connection, say, hey, I noticed you're underperforming, and I tried to make it really clear what you needed to get a B or an A instead of a C, and I didn't see a change, and just want to know that it's really okay to let me know what's going on with you, and I'm here if there's anything I can do to help, and then just like the D's and
Right.
F's, and then you have to let it go, but do try to, I guess, I make a personal connection and just let them know that it's okay to be, that you've got a life that's much more important than your grade in this class.
Right.
But it means a lot to me, and if you want me to help, so.
And recognize that that's a big responsibility that you're putting on yourself, and give yourself some time to sort of feel that too. And you might not, you know, it might be a personally bad week for you, and you might not be up for it that week, right? Or you've got to get midterm grades in or something like that. You maybe don't have time to reach out to every individual student who's failing your class. Don't beat yourself up the next week that you didn't reach out to every single student.
I failed them or something.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I'd be sort of interested to hear how people, teachers feel about student self-assessment as a form of motivation, and not at the end of the class, but say before midterm. Does anybody engage in that sort of interaction with your students?
You mean that idea of like, how much time have I put into the course? How much time do I spend in preparation? How much time do I work on assignments? Is that what you mean?
Right, like how am I
How's my
doing?
participation? Yes.
How am I doing? Because it sort of makes them accountable for what they're doing. And then you can see how they're, and most of the time, I find students are very demeaning. They're not doing, they say, oh, I'm doing terrible, and they're doing okay, you know. But then you can assign individual projects, and you can put them in groups with other people and sort of understand what might be motivating them. I just have found that to be a really good tool.
Yeah, one of the things I've tried doing is I have published on my website directions on how to do an exam postmortem, because the students surprisingly don't take the time to really analyze the mistakes, and they come into your office and you ask how they did, and they give you a number, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not going to help you figure out how to study for your exam, the next exam, better. You know, what you need to do is to go through these steps and figure out why you guessed incorrectly on these questions, why you may have guessed correctly on this, why you knew this, why you thought you knew this other one but answered incorrectly. And I unfortunately have no feedback whatsoever from my students as to whether or not they're actually using it, except for those that come to my office. But those that actually come to my office and talk to me about it say that it's been quite helpful.
So that examines the whole process of
Yeah.
their learning, yeah.
Yeah, and there's actually, I have two different versions. One's that's real quick, down and dirty, and one that's much more comprehensive.
I love that. I love that idea. I do. Again, it comes back to learning how to learn. You know, they
Right.
don't. They take it, it's over, and they forget about it.
Right.
And it's such an opportunity to learn.
The same thing with writing assignments, you know. I cover mine with purple ink and I hand it back to them. I say, let's work together to make this what it needs to be. Because I'm not going to give you your final grade until we're both satisfied you got where you needed to get. And, you know, for most of them, they really appreciate that and they take advantage of the opportunity. And the people who say, no, I'll just stick with my C. I say, okay, then this is likely how you're going to write for the rest of your life, and good luck getting a job.
Natural consequences.
Yes.
And I know this is not possible for everyone, but last semester I started doing voiceovers on their assignments, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. They could hear my tone of voice, they could hear the structure that I was saying it, they could look at it in context with what they were talking about. I also found that on paper, my comments might have been shorter, whereas verbally I can talk a lot more. And they would say, oh, we can see you talking with your hands, like while we're listening to the feedback on the assignment. So, and then having them dialogue even back to me, and then critiquing their, working on their assignment and resubmitting it. So it becomes this whole process of learning how to learn, right? So it's not just, oh, you're gonna hand in an assignment and I'm gonna tell you what you did right and wrong, and then it stops, but we can kind of have this conversation about it, and we can learn together about the perspective. So I like the voiceover.
What software is that they use?
You know what, so it's super clunky, and I've been talking to eCampus, and you can't do it on eCampus, so I just did a voiceover kind of thing. It's not ideal, but it seemed to work with everyone's software. Like, every student I had was able to access it, so.
I'm sorry, when you say voice, because I do SoundCloud, and I just make a little MP3 for them, and they get my voice, but when you say over their assignment, how's that look?
Yeah, so I
Or
would
what was this
just do,
concept?
So I'm sorry for the tech savvy people, I hang my head, but this is what I did. So I picked up my phone and I went to the voice voice thread option, and I would do a sound bite, and then I would attach it into the assignment where I wanted it, and then I would take another voiceover. It's super clunky, and I'm telling you, it's not ideal. And I sat with eCampus, and we talked about it, and we tried to figure out something else. Right now, it seems that there wasn't that possibility in the Dropbox to be able to do that.
Was it
I
a
think
written assignment that
it
they
was.
did?
It was.
So you're adding like a sound bite into
Yeah.
on a written assignment?
Yeah, so maybe SoundCloud is, I don't know that tool. I'm
Maybe
gonna,
you just put a link to it.
okay, so I'm gonna try voice, this semester we're using VoiceThread. So I'm hoping that that kind of elevates this text clunkiness that I experienced last semester. But they did like the voice feedback, and I'm sure that you may have had similar comments that your students like, maybe not. I don't know.
I like it so much. I think I over. They don't care.
I've been thinking it would be great for online courses too, because I think kind of as my online teaching has evolved, I miss that back and forth, that you get some time in the face-to-face, that I've tried to have them submit assignments multiple times, so they can take my feedback, incorporate it into the assignment, and resubmit it. But I like the idea of giving it verbally
Right.
too.
So if you have some great tool that you're not saying right now afterwards, if you can come up and share that with me.
If anybody wants a vampire dollar, I'm happy to give you one. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming. Good job.